Kansai, I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced his choices for federal cabinet this morning when he and his ministers were sworn in by Governor General Mary Simon at Rideau Hall in Ottawa. Among them, rookie member of Parliament Mandy Gold-Masti has made history. She is now the Minister of Indigenous Services. This is the first time an Indigenous person has held the role since it was created in 2017 by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Gold-Masti was made the first female Grand Chief of the Cree Nation government in 2021 before resigning from the position in March to run as an MP candidate in Quebec. First-time Manitoba Anishinaabe MP Rebecca Chartrand was also sworn in as Minister of Arctic Affairs and Minister responsible for the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency. And former longtime Saskatchewan Métis MP Buckley Belanger will support the cabinet as Secretary of State for Rural Development. And we will have a full report on the new Liberal cabinet on tonight's newscast. Staying in Ottawa, a group of Indigenous leaders held a press conference on Monday, laying out their priorities for the first 100 days of the new Liberal government under Mark Carney. The press conference was headed by Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Senator Paul Prosper, who released a document of 7 priorities, which includes investments in the Indigenous economy and housing, reintroduction of the First Nations Clean Water Act, and an external review of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Prosper was also asked about Alberta Premier Daniel Smith's recent musings about a referendum on separation and how this could affect First Nations rights there.
There has to be a recognition as a precondition of the existing rights that, as National Chief has said, that that existed before the founding of this country. These are constitutional rights that can't be just overridden, for sake of a political stance.
In that same Ottawa press conference, Annapolis Valley First Nation Chief Gerald Toney said there has been no movement on a file that involved 2 Mi'kmaq fishermen. In March of last year, they were left at a gas station in Nova Scotia in the cold without shoes or phones by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans officers. Last year on July 8th, then Fisheries Minister Diane Laboutier called for a review of DFO policies. Chief Toney says the way DFO treated the 2 fishermen was inhumane, and he urged Prime Minister Mark Carney to take action within his first 100 days in office. Laboutier previously said that following the review, a panel of Indigenous leadership would be chosen within a month. A veteran DFO officer was suspended last December without pay for 10 days for his role in the arrest and treatment of those 2 Mi'kmaq fishers. DFO officers protested in support of that officer. An Okanagan First Nation community is calling for the resignation of independent MLA Dallas Brody after more controversial comments she made regarding the residential school system. CTV's Penny Daphlos reports.
May 1st, Dallas Brody courted controversy once again.
The greatest threats to our unity: political interference by the Chinese Communist Party, the fragmentation of BC by over 200 bands, each asserting its own sovereignty.
The Premier responded immediately.
This member's incoherent and consistently racist posturing in this House against Indigenous and First Nations that do in fact have rights and sovereignty in this province.
The Penticton Indian Band wrote a letter to Brody and her fellow independents denouncing the divisive rhetoric and what it called explicit racism.
Absolutely not either of those things. I would say that we want to be undivisive and get away from policies that are rooted in racial differences.
I think we fight every day to make sure that everybody in this province has equal opportunity. And the last thing we want to do is divide people based on race or anything like that.
Brody and Tara Armstrong have now responded with a public letter accusing First Nations leaders of deepening racial conflict.
It doesn't feature any facts or new perspectives or information. It just continues racialized, discriminatory attack on Indigenous peoples.
The Union of BC Indian Chiefs points out every MLA voted in favor of adopting the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People in 2019, with the public increasingly understanding and supportive of residential school survivors. They view the independents' comments as a step backwards.
It's so counterproductive, it's so destructive, it's so divisive.
Brody and Armstrong don't see it that way.
What it really boils down to is just making sure, again, that everybody has equal rights in the province.
The key is to bring people together, all of us working together as a team, not saying this group, this group, this group, everybody sort of fighting against one another.
Brody started the war of words in the legislature, and while she's drawing attention, it does nothing to change Indigenous rights. Penny Dufflaw, CTV News, Vancouver.
Advocacy groups stood with First Nation leaders at Queen's Park in Toronto during a Monday press conference, voicing their concerns about the Ontario government's proposed Bill 5. It intends to create special economic zones. Critics say it will trample on Indigenous rights and environmental assessments to speed up approval of resource extraction projects. First Nation leaders from Niskandaga First Nation, the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians, Friends of the Ottawapiskat River, Democracy Watch, and Indigenous youth took turns at the podium. They're calling on the Ontario government to immediately pause the bill. They describe it as a dangerous attack on the environment and Indigenous rights. 14-year-old Bida Bin from Niskandaga First Nation was emotional as she spoke on behalf of the youth. 70% of her community is currently evacuated due to flooding of the nursing station, as well as Niskandaga has been without clean drinking water for 3 decades.
I don't want to lose the land. I don't want to lose what we have. We've come so far. And I'm afraid what's going to happen. Doug Ford, if you can hear me, if you're watching this, can't you see that this will hurt us a lot if you bulldoze what we have, if you take our land? You say that you're there for your country, but what about us?
People in Broken Head, Ojibwe Nation, about 90 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg, were being evacuated yesterday. However, thanks to fire crews, the fire has been extinguished as of this morning. Just after 7 p.m. last night, residents living on the west side of the reserve had to be evacuated. Officials said thankfully the wind was in their favor and the fires moved towards Lake Winnipeg as crews battled into the night. As of 10:10 a.m. this morning, Broken Head Ojibwe officials said the fires have been successfully extinguished. A fire ban remains in effect, and they're asking residents to remain vigilant and take all precautions. Dene Nations recently gathered in Yellowknife to address the ongoing drug crisis there. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Dene Nation recently held emergency meetings over 3 days in Yellowknife to address a steadily growing and sometimes fatal drug crisis in the Northwest Territories. APTN's Bruce De La Cruz has more.
Dene Nation chiefs, elders, and members packed the Chateau Nova in Yellowknife this week for a forum on public safety. They discussed the growing drug crisis in the Northwest Territories and the best ways to combat it.
So for the 3 days that we gathered, we were looking for some kind of a sign for a hope. The people will feel hopeful that something will be done for young generations.
The Dene Nation declared a state of emergency in July 2024 because of a significant rise in drug-related deaths and incidents in their communities. According to territorial health officials, there were 31 opioid-related deaths in the Northwest Territories between 2016 and 2024. Several guest speakers were invited to speak at the forum. RCMP Superintendent Chris Romanchich discussed the creation of a top offender list to easier identify drug dealers. Dale Cox, former chief of police for Lakeshore Regional Police in Alberta, explained steps to introduce Indigenous policing. And brother and sister Dene lawyers Shoshana and Sasha Paul discussed banishment. By the third day, 13 resolutions on combating the drug crisis were unanimously approved. One of the hottest was a Dene Nation task force on drugs, alcohol, and crime prevention.
That the task force will work collaboratively with the RCMP, GNWT, Department of Justice, and other federal and territorial counterparts to advocate for solutions, policy changes that address the emerging needs of Dene communities. And
each First Nation will elect task force members, and the chiefs will figure out who pays for it.
Motion passed unanimously.
Another resolution was the creation of a Dene policing program. Dene National Chief George McKenzie called it, quote, a crucial step.
The RCMP, they are not our people overall. Because they're not our people, they don't understand our culture, our philosophy, our beliefs, and how we do things. So if we get Native policing, our own people, they will understand our society. And it stands to reason they will be more effective for enforcing the law for us.
Chief McKenzie had a message for younger Dene Nation members.
We didn't forget about the young people, but this task force will plan it so young people can be a part of this gathering. Imagine every region has about 5 young people in the audience. It's going to look powerful. But we got to find the money and plan it well.
Tate Juniper of the Sawtoo is one of those young people.
It's time for our young people to be seen and to be heard. It's time for our leadership to make room for them at the table. It's time for our leadership to stop talking about having them represented and start allowing them to be represented in these discussions.
The conference was live streamed with over 40,000 views. They can be found on the Dene Nation's Facebook page at facebook.com/Dene Nation. Bruce De La Cruz, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Monday marked the 140th anniversary of the Battle of Batage. The 4-day battle ended the Northwest Resistance of 1885, led by Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont. The battle took place on May 9th to May 12th in 1885 in Batage, Saskatchewan, where Métis forces fought to defend their land, rights, and way of life. The fighting started in Duck Lake, moved to Fish Creek, and then ended in Batage. Métis and First Nation fighters united against Canadian troops. After 4 days, the Métis-led forces ran out of ammunition and were eventually defeated. While no official events took place on Monday, Métis Nation Saskatchewan says they are planning a 150th anniversary event with details to be announced at a later date. The editor of the recently released book titled Red Dress joins T.R. Wheatley for a new episode of Face to Face tonight on APTN. Jamie Black-Morset worked on the Red Dress project for 15 years, creating awareness about the MMIWG and Two-Spirit people crisis. Here's a preview of tonight's Face to Face.
The red dress is always kind of led by an intuition, and I feel like this opportunity to write a book about the Red Dress Project came really at the right time, and I had, of course, no idea that the movement to search the landfill would kind of come to a head at that time. But it really gave up an opportunity for us to have a platform. Cambria Harris wrote a little bit in the book, and she has her poetry in there. And I was able to talk a little bit about what the community was going through during those 2 years as part of this book. So it felt like a very important timing to be able to tell that story.
We now want to tell you about this week's new web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, do you feel your community is prepared for the wildfire season? You can answer yes, no, or unsure. Go to aptnnews.ca to have your say. Métis Cree country artist Ashley Ghostkeeper is up next. Stay with us. St. John 0, Charlottetown 8. Cartwright -3, Happy Valley Goose Bay 2. Quebec City 14, St. Jovite 19. 19 in Ottawa, Sarnia 21. Sioux Lookout 26, Thunder Bay 16 in sun. Puckatawagan 15, Thompson 10. 26 in Winnipeg, Gimli 24. 20 in Yorkton, Swift Current 9. 1 in Stony Rapids, Meadow Lake 12. Rain in Peace River at 22, Grand Prairie 21. Rain in Lethbridge at 16, Calgary 17. Rain in Vancouver 16, Kamloops 23. Fort Nelson 16, Smithers 17. 10 in Whitehorse, Mayo 10. Wati 8, Yellowknife 9. -2 in Fort McPherson, Colville Lake -3. -4 in Baker Lake, Whale Cove -3. And Iqaluit 1, Clyde River -7. Thanks for staying with us. Our next guest is a Métis Cree country artist who is originally from Red Deer, Alberta. Since she was 8 years old, Ashley Ghostkeeper began writing and singing her own songs. Fast forward to today, and she has now released up to 8 of her own singles and has opened up for the iconic Canadian group, the Seaweed Band. She also made it to the top 5 spot of the Canadian Indigenous Music Countdown with her song, Waiting on a No. RTR Wheatley recently spoke to Ashley Ghostkeeper in studio. Here's that interview.
Ghostkeeper, amazing voice. You recently got to debut that song, Cowboy's Dream. with the Seaweed Band here in Winnipeg. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. It was really a full circle moment for me. I've opened for Seaweed a few times now, and it just felt like coming home. It was really special.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about Cowboy's Dream and where the inspiration came from.
The inspiration comes from my dad, his cousins, and their friends that growing up in the 80s in northern Alberta, and really that brotherhood and the passion they had for living that cowboy rodeo life, and how it wasn't about the shiny buckles or anything. They had a love for the sport, and it was a way of life. And you know, once a cowboy, always a cowboy. So I was really the vessel for this story, and I'm very honored for that.
That's awesome to also honor your family at the same time. You know, you also have a new album coming out soon. When will it be released, and what kind of message do you share in this album?
Yeah, very exciting. I got my first debut album coming out later this fall, a date to be announced. This album is just something different. It's, you know, 90s country influence, that honky tonk. And it really speaks to empowerment of being a woman, and that positivity, and just the resilience you have in life, and yeah, really woman empowering. So I'm really excited.
The cowboy blood runs in your family, as you said, but they're also singers and songwriters. You know, what was it like growing up, and how has it shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I come from a big strong Métis family of singers and songwriters and artists, and I really say my family and my bloodline really gave me the gift of love for music.
You know, is there any words of advice for other Indigenous youth out there, you know, who dream of also doing music?
For sure. I mean, if you love something, you just got to do it. And there's a reason that gift was placed in your heart, and we have that responsibility to use that gift, and I was very fortunate to be given the gift of love of music.
All right, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiara and Ashley. And that's your daytime newscast for this Tuesday. Our Dennis Ward is back for your evening newscast in a few hours. Please join us then. Hi, miigwech masicho kwana. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Ekse.